So welcome this morning to the presentation on Manitoba Corrections. I have a PowerPoint here that I'll go through with you to talk with you a little bit about all the process for recruitment and interviewing and our training process. So why a career in Manitoba Justice? Actually, we employ over 3,000 people within our department, and there's various locations that you can work at, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we have 9 different centers within our province, and within those centers we have a variety of different career opportunities for people. We hire correctional officers, juvenile counselors, as well as trades instructors, teachers, nurses, the whole variety of people within our employ. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is that our department's strength comes from the employees. So our recruitment and our selection processes are designed to assist us in hiring the most qualified employees. And as we go through the PowerPoint presentation, you'll see the different competencies that we're looking for in people that we hire. We always look for hard-working, dedicated people who want to contribute their skills, their knowledge, and their abilities to help us stay responsive to the needs of the communities that we serve. In our institutions or in our centers, we have a variety of different people from different cultural backgrounds, different ages, both genders, and we would like to have our workforce represent that. So we're always looking for interested people who are up for an incredible challenge in working with our clientele and a very rewarding career. And there it says, a challenging and rewarding job with Manitoba Corrections. Our goal actually is to have the lowest recidivism rate in Canada. So we want to have the least amount of people returning to custody upon their release. We want to make sure that we provide appropriate programming and supports and services while they're in custody so that when they are released, they have a better chance at remaining out of custody and living a productive life within our communities. Our mandate is to contribute to public safety, and we do that in a variety of ways. As I mentioned, we have 9 centers throughout the province. We have 2 adult centers and 2 youth centers and 7 adult centers. One is Milner Ridge Correctional Center, which is located in Milner, or in Beausejour, pardon me, not in Milner Ridge, but in Beausejour. It's in the Agassiz Forest, so it's in a beautiful setting in that forest. It's on an old army base, so there's a couple of different areas within that institution. One piece is like a cottage setting in the sense that it's the old barracks that the offenders are in, and there's a newer area that has been built and is state-of-the-art. So there's a couple of different work options there. The PAW Correctional Center is in the PAW, Manitoba. And again, we've added on at that institution, and there's a need for staff at both institutions. We have Brandon Correctional Center, which is in Brandon, Manitoba. Dauphin Correctional Center, of course, is in Dauphin, Manitoba. Headingley Correctional Center is just a few minutes, maybe 15, 20 minutes from the perimeter. And we have the Winnipeg Remand Center, which is just downtown Winnipeg. And the Women's Correctional Center is also in the RM of Headingley. A little bit closer to the perimeter than the Headingley Correctional Center. Our 2 youth centers are Manitoba Youth Center, which is on Doncaster in Winnipeg here, and Agassiz Youth Center is in Portage la Prairie. So with having 9 different institutions, there's the option of being able to decide whether you would prefer to spend your career working with women, with men, adult men, or with youth. So the roles and responsibilities of a corrections employee. Our employees must demonstrate strong leadership, communication, and interpersonal skills. When I mentioned before that we have specific competencies that we look for in our staff, these are some of those competencies that are listed. Have a common sense approach to problem solving, decision making, and conflict resolution. Demonstrate respect for others. You have to be able to function well on a team, achieve quality results, and manage change and stress. When we look at our bulletins, our competitions that come out on our Government of Manitoba website, it lists all these competencies that you have to be able to indicate to us in your cover letter and in your resume how you meet those competencies. Some of our responsibilities as juvenile counselors and correctional officers are to ensure the safety and security of youth or adult offenders through direct supervision. What that means is that we get to know those offenders that we're working with, that we understand what some of their challenges might be in the community, and that we try to provide supports and services to assist them in making some positive change while they're in custody as well as when they return to the community. Another part of our responsibility is to manage the needs of individual offenders, including risk assessments, programming needs, and release planning. Once somebody has reached the end of their term with us, we need to ensure that they are connected to the proper resources and supports in the community so that they can continue on a healing journey and have success in the community. We work in a variety of different locations, such as living units, control pods, and recreation supervision areas. Again, this depends on the institution that you're working at. And as I mentioned before, Milner Ridge Correctional Centre is in Beausejour, and it's in the Agassiz Forest, so it's in a beautiful rural setting, whereas you have the Winnipeg Remand Centre, which is in a downtown, an urban area. So very different responsibilities would be there for those staff that work in those institutions, which is important when you decide which institution it is that you might like to work at. Another thing that we do is we provide community escorts to doctor appointments, to funerals, to community events. Also, we facilitate programs within the institutions. So those programs might be any type of cognitive behavioral programming, which looks at our stages of change when we're looking at making changes in our lives. Some of the job requirements are to meet the medical requirements, both physical and mental, and what we do is we provide you with a evaluation form that you would bring to your doctor and have your doctor sign off on that form that you are physically and mentally capable of doing the duties as assigned. And there is a list of those duties. It might be standing for long periods of time, running, restraining somebody, physical exertion, or, as I say, just standing for long periods of time supervising. You have to provide a recent, and again within 4 months, satisfactory criminal record search, child abuse registry check, and adult abuse registry check. You have to be prepared to undergo a security screening process, and that is done with our Corrections Intelligence Unit, and it just is a longer conversation with you in regards to your suitability. You have to have a valid standard first aid, your CPR Level C certificate, and have a valid Manitoba Class 5 driver's license. It has to be your full driver's license. And if you're interested in working out at Agassiz Youth Centre, you have to have a Class 4 driver's license, as you'd be driving a larger vehicle and escorting youth out into the community. Number 6, we have to be able to commit to a 10-week full-time unpaid correctional officer juvenile counselor training program. There are some options for supports in regards to funding for this training. I always encourage people from a First Nation community or the Métis community to approach their local or their band and see if there's opportunity to gain a training allowance while they're at basic training. As well, sometimes people are able to secure assistance through EI. So there's always those options to look at for that 10 weeks of basic training. The physical requirements is something that we should have a look at. Oops. You have to have sufficient physical strength and ability to restrain or search inmates, and that doesn't mean that you have to have extreme fitness or extreme muscle strength. What we're looking for is people who have the ability to do the job as assigned. You need, as I mentioned before, to run for an emergency, for any kind of a response to an escape attempt, running upstairs, again, maybe standing for long periods of time. So there is that physical aspect to it. And then you have to have good vision. You can wear glasses, and you have to have good hearing. And your doctor would be able to indicate on that form that you meet those criteria. Some people ask whether if they've had a criminal record in the past, are they eligible to apply for corrections. And we do recruit people with the highest personal and professional standards, including respect for the law. However, we also realize that people sometimes have made mistakes, but that we also have the ability to make change in our lives. And as a result, we look at each situation on an individual basis and make decision based on that. So I always tell people, don't pre-screen yourself. Please apply, and we can look at those circumstances on an individual basis. What we ask, though, is that you're honest and upfront right from the beginning, and if there are those kinds of concerns, that you let us know right away. The recruitment process. The first thing you have to do is just submit your application. On our Government of Manitoba website, we have our listings of all the current employment opportunities, and that is where we advertise for correctional officers and juvenile counselors. To begin with, all you need to do is submit your resume. We don't do any screening at that point. The first point of screening actually is our testing process, and it's held at the convention center in the theater there. It takes about 6 hours to complete all of the testing. There's 3 different tests, and I'm going to get into that a little bit further in the presentation as to what's involved in the testing. Upon successful completion of all 3 tests, we have facility tours. So of all the institutions that are hiring in any one competition, you can go and tour all those institutions that are currently looking for either correctional officers or juvenile counselors. I always encourage people to tour as many institutions as possible so that you have a really good look at what might be the best fit for you. From that point, we go to interviews. Our interviews are done on site at the institutions, and they are behavioral-based style interviews. We use a board process where there would be about 3 people interviewing you at the institution. And previously, I talked about the competencies that we look for. You would be asked questions on all of those competencies, so you would have to be prepared with your examples, indicating how you meet all of those competencies. So for example, one of them was teamwork, and you would need to be able to have examples in regards to how you've worked in a team or how you've handled conflict or crisis management in the past. The idea being that if you can show to us that you have been able to use proper conflict management skills or you have worked in a team in the past, that the likelihood is that you'll be able to do that again in the future. So our interviews are, as I said, done on site at the institution that you choose that you would like to be employed at. Upon successful interview, we do our security screening with our Corrections Intelligence Unit, and that's that piece of it. We have, after that, the reference checks from your interview. We ask that you provide supervisory references as opposed to personal or friends or relatives. We need supervisory references. Upon Positive reference checks, we go towards our training offer where you're invited to come to our 10 weeks of basic training. And upon successful completion of those 10 weeks, you begin employment. You're guaranteed part-time employment at that institution that you interviewed at and that provided you that offer of training. At our basic training, there is a grade point average that you have to maintain, attendance standards, and you're constantly assessed during that 10-week period. So for applications, you can look at www.manitoba.ca for any of our bulletins that come out. We just had a bulletin close early this week on Monday, and the testing for that is happening the 20th and 21st of this week, which will be here at the Convention Centre, just at the theatre. And as I said, it takes about 6 hours for that process if you complete each test. What you need to provide for your application is a resume and cover letter. And as I mentioned before, your resume and your cover letter must clearly indicate how you meet those competencies that are listed in that bulletin. So it's important to tailor your cover letter and your resume to that. You need to quote the competition number for the bulletins, and at the top of each one of those competitions on the website there will be a competition number. It's important to put that on all of your communications regarding your application, because that's what the reference number will be for the competition that you applied for. It's important to have your email address. We do most of our communication via email, and so make sure that's on your resume and your cover letter. We do take general applications for correctional officers and juvenile counselors, and you can send them to correctionsrecruitment@gov.mb.ca. It's our general mailbox for corrections applicants. And if you do send your application in when we don't have a bulletin out, we will keep it and then contact you when when the next testing is. So for instance, we're just going to have a testing this week. It'll be probably a couple of months, and there will be another bulletin out and we'll do another testing. You can drop resumes off in person at 405 Broadway, the 11th floor, room 1130. You can also fax them in, and that's our fax number. All resumes that come in are invited for testing. So we don't do any pre-screening at the application point where you're just sending your resume in. Everybody is invited to testing. So what to expect when you come for testing? We have a high volume of candidates that come. Sometimes a couple of hundred people come to write the test. It's a very formal presentation, and you'll meet Mona O'Neill, who is our recruitment officer, and she administers the tests on those nights of the testing. Actually, Mona is the author of this presentation, and she's actually done a very good job with the PowerPoint presentation. So thank you, Mona. Again, it's about 6 hours in total. There are some breaks in between, and we're looking at how you manage your time. So the tests are timed. There are some required forms that get completed, and there will be opportunity for you to self-declare if you fit into any of the equity groups, but those forms are all confidential. There will be correctional officers and juvenile counselors present, and they will be monitoring the room during the testing process, so they'll be walking around. And there is opportunity to ask questions if you need clarification. All the information in regards to the testing process will be forwarded to you via email, so it's important to ensure that you do have that email with you. There's 3 different tests. They assess your written skills, your decision making, your judgment, and your personal suitability. The first one is a video test, and we have another one after that. It's the C1, C2 test, and then the third test is a work personality index test. In order to move from one test to the next, you have to successfully complete the first one. And upon successful completion of the first test, then you're invited back into the testing area to write the second test. And again, you have to pass that second test in order to move forward to the third test. If you're successful at all 3 of those testing processes, your results are kept for 12 months, so you have 1 year that your test results are good. So here's a sample video test question. During roll call, the shift leader states that officers are to maintain a professional stance when dealing with visitors. During your shift, you overhear an officer in a loud, angry argument with a visitor. Now, I can't show you the video for this, but this is a written description of what the video would look like. So we would have a screen just like this up at the front of the room. You would see the video, the little vignette, which is about 30 seconds long, of this scene of a shift leader and a visitor in conversation with each other. And you would have that video to watch on the screen, then you would have this paragraph to read, and then you would have about 60 seconds to figure out what your answer would be. Those words, what do you do, come up on the screen, and you have the options of picking one of those, A, B, C, or D. And can one of you give me an idea what the answer would be for that? B? I'll see if you're right. Yes, you're right. So the answer is B. And that's kind of the way it goes along on that test. This is what the answer sheet looks like, and all you do is you shade in your answer. We mark those tests immediately after the testing process, and your results are posted on the wall, not with your name beside it. You'll be receiving a number at the beginning of the testing process, and if your number is highlighted, then you're invited back in to write the second test, which is our C1, C2 test, and this is what that test looks like. Again, it's multiple choice, and you just shade in your answer accordingly. Here's an example of that test question. So in most correctional facilities, it is the inmates who do the cleaning. It is often the correctional officer's duty to blank these chores. Although officers are not responsible for housekeeping chores, they should be aware of correct procedures when a correctional facility's overall sanitary condition declines. It may be a sign of poor supervision. So you have for number 1, 4 choices, number 2, 4 choices, and number 3, 4 choices. So I'll ask you just in your mind to think which one of those would be the correct answer. And I'll show you the answer. The answer is for number 1, supervise, for number 2, doing, and number 3, housekeeping. So you have to keep in mind too that each one of the answers for some of these tests are given a different value point, so you want to have the best answer. This is the last test that you would do, the WPI, and you rate yourself on there according to how you feel about the statement. Either strongly disagree, neutral, agree, or strongly agree. The statements look something like this. People describe me as understanding. So when you look at the test sheet, you would answer accordingly. Whether you strongly agree with that or whether you agree with it or not, you just answer for your own personal response to that. Another example is I have a hard time finishing what I start. I become tense when too many things happen at once. In the second test, what we test for is inductive and deductive reasoning. So here's just some examples on what inductive and deductive reasoning is. Here's a question. Which inmates have sick call appointments on Monday? Can you decide? Kelly and Hand, Kelly and George, Sands and Hill, or Hill and George? What would your answer be? Which inmates have sick call appointments on a Monday? Kelly and Hand, yes. So here's an example for a deductive question. For about a week, rumors of an escape attempt have been circulating in the housing unit. You should A, report the rumors to your supervisor, B, ignore the rumors, C, try to get more information from the inmates, or D, tell the warden an escape attempt is about to occur. So you decide in your mind what you think the right answer would be for that one. And we'll look at what inductive and deductive reasoning is. It's a specific way of looking at problem solving, which is what we're testing for. And here's an example of the differences between inductive and deductive reasoning. One thing to remember is that inductive reasoning goes from the specific to the general, whereas deductive reasoning goes from the general to the more specific. One is assumption, the other is fact. And what you need to do is just look at the information that's presented. Don't try to draw from what your knowledge might be outside of the information that's presented in the question. So just some of the examples there. All sheep that I have seen are white, therefore all sheep are white. Now I know we do have some different colored sheep, but that's just an example of inductive reasoning and how you come to make those deductive and inductive decisions in the work that you do. This slide is about our correctional officer, juvenile counselor testing checklist, and it is just a list that you would receive and sign and read over about all the things that you need to ensure that you've completed and that you've addressed. So just that you're knowledgeable that the position requires that you work overtime with little or no notice, work shifts that may extend into the evening, and does it present any difficulty for you? Because that is what the shifts would look like, that's what the career looks like. So you would answer yes or no. Again, it goes on through the physical, the mental requirements, the operating environment, what that looks like, as well as whether you've lived in Canada for how long, are you eligible to work in Canada, and at the end you just sign off on that. People always ask what kind of tips we have for coming to the testing. One of the most important things is to arrive on time, be a little bit early. There's usually a lineup at the registration desk, so you need to be mindful of that and ensure that you have enough time. There's nothing worse than coming to a testing process and being anxious about your time. Make sure you bring your driver's license. We'll need a photocopy of your driver's license, both sides, as well as a pen, pencil, eraser. You're not allowed to bring food or drink into the theater area, so don't bring any of that. You will be given a break after each test, but those are the things that you need to ensure that you have with you. Be mindful of the time. Again, we're looking at your time management skills. So when you're writing your tests, if the instructor tells you that it's for a certain amount of time, be prepared to complete that test in that amount of time. Pace yourself accordingly. Make sure you have a watch or some device that you can mind your time. Don't rush. Take your time, answer the questions exactly how you think you would respond in that situation, not how you think we would respond. We want to know what your problem-solving skills are. Relax. Try to filter out the surrounding noises. As I mentioned, there will be people wandering around the room monitoring the test, and there's going to be other noises in the room as well. So try to be able to ignore that and to filter out the unnecessary sounds. Make sure you read through the corrections applicant guide, and there's some examples in there and some other tips in that applicant guide as well. That is usually emailed to you when you submit your application, so be sure that you have a good look at that. If you don't understand something and you need to ask a question, you just raise your hand and somebody will come to where you're at and answer your question for you. Make sure you listen to the instructions. Mona is really good at giving the instructions at testing, and her instructions are very plain and clear, and just please listen to how she provides those instructions. Answer your tests openly and honestly. Again, respond to how you would perform, how you think you would actually perform. So once that successful completion of the testing is done, you're invited to tour the facilities. So only those candidates notified by Human Resources can tour the facilities, so you'll get a notification about that via email. Tour as many centers as you can. But you're requested to apply and submit a criminal record check, adult abuse registry check, and child abuse registry check at this point. Security screening forms are also going to be distributed at that time. Safety policies and standard procedures will be followed by all candidates during tours, and that'll be listed in the email notification that you get, and you'll also be reminded of that once you attend the institution. Just be really mindful of what you're observing when you're in the institutions or in the centers. It's a good opportunity to decide whether that's an environment that you would like to work in. Again, each institution and each center is different, and one may feel differently to you than another. The interviews, they're all conducted at the centers, as I mentioned before. You can only interview at one center, so that's why it's important to attend as many of them as possible so that you can decide which one might be the best fit for you. It's a panel interview. As I mentioned, we have 3 people on the board, and we ask behavioral-based questions. If you're not too sure what that means, then you might want to do some research on that, or you can contact one of us from Manitoba Corrections, and we can help you prepare for that. They're usually situational questions that we'll ask you. We're going to include stress management questions, teamwork, knowledge of Aboriginal history and culture, problem solving. So be prepared for those kinds of questions. Again, we need your supervisory references, and security screening is done by our Corrections Intelligence Unit, where they'll interview you and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions as well. Again, just another reminder that we need your criminal record, your adult abuse registry check, your child abuse, and your security screening form at this point. The interview that you have with our intelligence unit is confidential. As you move along in that process and you're successful at each point, you're provided a training offer. So once all those previous steps are completed, the offer is made, and if you're considered satisfactory by Human Resource Services and all documents are submitted, then the offer to attend training is made. Usually there will be about a 2-week period, so you'll have opportunity to make arrangements with any current employment or any childcare that may be needed to prepare for that 10-week basic training. Additional documents will need to be submitted at that time, and it'll be your medical form, your CPA's, or your first aid and your CPR certificates. We do have flexible training dates, so if when you're called and attending that training offer is not at a good time for you, again, remember that your test results are good for a year and you could defer to another training date. I've already mentioned about external funding opportunities, and employment is guaranteed upon successful completion of that 10-week basic training, and as long as there are no other concerns that have been raised during that evaluation period, your employment is secured. You're classified as a part-time term employee with Manitoba Justice Corrections, but having said that, there is the opportunity in many of our institutions to gain more than part-time hours. So you could actually be working full-time hours but be considered as a part-time staff. Again, if you're working towards post-secondary education and you're attending university, we can be flexible about the hours that you're working and when you're available, as long as we know ahead of time. We do have benefits available for part-time status people, and that would be discussed with you as you move through that training and recruitment process. If you have further questions, you can contact us. Mona O'Neill is our recruitment officer, and her information is there, or you can forward your resume to correctionsrecruitment@gov.mb.ca or drop it off at the office at the Woodsworth building. You can also contact me if you have further questions. Again, my name's Hazel Perry, and my number is 204-471-1265. And thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, please contact me.